Thanks for stopping by. My name is Shawnee Carroll. I'm one of the branch services managers for Mesa County Libraries. Today with me, I have Karis Rydlizky, the program director for the House.
Hi, thanks, Shawnee. So I'm program director of the House. This is a nonprofit here in Mesa County that provides housing and services to help keep young folks aged 13 to 24 in safe and stable housing. And a big part of my job is helping young folks make positive changes and make good decisions in their lives. So today I'm here to tell you and give you some tools about decision making with this really cool strategy called motivational interviewing. So today we'll talk about what motivational is and how it can help you. We'll use a couple examples here with us today, some changes that you might be wanting to make in your own life. And one is maybe you want to change your spending habits. Maybe you got this Karis Inc check recently and you normally splurge a little bit, but you want to figure out how to make that change to use your money in a way that you feel is more responsible. Or maybe another common change you want to make is starting an exercise routine or getting healthy in some way. So we'll use these two examples today. We're also going to learn about the different stages of change that people go through when they're making a change or making a decision. We'll use the principles of motivational interviewing, understand your own motivating factors, and then use a couple tools. One is the Decisional balance worksheet that can help people sort of guide their thinking when they're making this sort of decision. Lastly, we'll talk about helping other people use this tool. So what is motivational interviewing? It's a conversational style that was developed by William Miller and Stephen Rolnick in the 80s and early 90s. And it's a tool that helps individuals to identify areas of change, to understand their own motivation for change, to increase their commitment to change, and to move through the stages of change from contemplation to preparation, action, and maintenance. We'll talk more about those stages here in a little bit. At the House, the teen shelter that I work with, we use this tool as a way to support young people in making positive choices for themselves. So this tool is used in all sorts of domains around which job to get, where to live, to start a healthy habit, whether to go to the doctors, to reduce drug use, or really any decision can be helped using these tools. For instance, one youth used this tool to think through the different educational options, to weigh the pros and cons before deciding that R5 High School was going to be the best educational choice for them. What is motivational interviewing and what's behind it? Motivational interviewing tells us that people are the experts in their own experiences. This means that you know the things that are most important to you. You know what's worked for you in the past or not worked for you in the past, and you have that knowledge for yourself about the changes that you could make in your own life. Motivational interviewing also says that ultimately people want for themselves good things. People want what is best, and that people are going to move towards health when they're given appropriate support and tools to do so. One of these ways that we give support to folks or support to ourselves with motivational interviewing is using this idea of unconditional positive regard. And that means that it's like a belief in someone else that they do want the positive things for themselves, and that negative choices are often a consequence of negative circumstances. And it's a way to move away from blaming folks, from shaming folks, and it's about working alongside people in the decisions that they're making. So the other thing that motivational interviewing tells us is that oftentimes when people are making a decision or thinking about making a change in their life, they go through a pretty similar cycle. And this is called the stages of change. And so the stages of change, and you see this little graphic on the right too, sort of are a circle. And that means that not every change is maintained 100% all the time. And every time we try to make a change again, we're learning from that experience or learning from our failed attempts at making a change. So our stages of change start at the top of this graphic with pre-contemplation. So that means you don't have any intention of changing your behavior. You're not even thinking about it yet. You're just like, this is my life and this is the way I'm doing it. After pre-contemplation, people generally move to a stage of contemplation, which is when they're aware a problem exists or they're starting to think about making a change. So in this stage, there's not a commitment to action, but people are talking about the pros and cons of a decision. They're talking about like, what could happen if I made this change that I might want to make in my life? Or what could happen if I made this decision for myself that deep down I do think is the better decision for me? After contemplation, after thinking about a decision for a while, folks move generally onto the stage of preparation, where they're intent upon taking action, where they're really laying the groundwork that they need to be able to take that next step. There may be preparing things, thinking about what it's going to look like when they get there, and preparing both mentally and physically for that change or that decision they're going to make. Then we have action. That's pretty straightforward. You're actively doing the thing. You've taken that step and you're just jumping right into it. You're actively modifying your behavior. And then maintenance is the stage 2 to 3 months in where you're really sustaining that change. Your new behavior has replaced your old behavior. You've maybe formed some habits around it. So exercise is the change you're making. Now it's just part of your routine to go for a run every morning. If financial well-being is your goal, then you're not having to fight yourself every time to stay inside your budget. And it's just sort of your new norm there. And then the last stage of change is relapse. And with motivational interviewing, we really want to normalize the fact that change is hard, even small change is hard. And it's normal that you might fall back into your old patterns of behavior. You might, get sick for a little bit, and then after you get sick, you just don't go back to jogging in the morning because you've lost that routine. Or you might, get a windfall and have an impulse to go do some retail therapy, and that's your relapse in your budget plan. And that's okay, and that's normal. And that just means that maybe it's time to start keeping going around that circle. So here we don't want to beat ourselves up for the mistakes we make, but we want to take that information, find out what made it hard to sustain that change, and then use that knowledge as we try to continue making that change again in the future. So we're going to work a couple of examples here today. And one change that you might be wanting to make is making healthier long-term financial decisions. You might have gotten a CARES Act check recently, or be looking forward to that. And this is a decision, and you can use MI for this, or motivational interviewing, to think about how you might spend that check. So you have a lot of options. You just might be putting it naturally towards like rent, utilities, and like basic necessities, but you also might be thinking about just treating yourself, getting a Nintendo Switch, doing something to splurge with it, and that might be a decision you're making also. Or you might be making a decision that you want to make like a charitable contribution with your check, or give it to someone less fortunate. And the first step of thinking about this decision is realizing that it is in fact a decision for you to make, and that slowing down long enough to think about the choices that you have, and how this fits into your long-term goals, or what you would want for your own best self. So you want to take a second and just think about how would you plan to make this decision? Another common area that people want to make change is saying that they want to get more exercise. And I think this is also really common, especially around New Year's, but also as it starts to get warmer outside, where you start thinking about moving more or getting fit for summer. And so you might also decide that your change that you want to think about is getting more exercise. There you might want to think about what's the specific change you want to make, what's worked in the past, or what hasn't worked so well when you've tried this goal in previous times, and what's your main reason for wanting to exercise more. So if you're at home, I want you to think about what's the change or decision that you're thinking about making in your life. And because we're going to use this as an example a little bit through the rest of the video. So it could be about financial stability, it could be about exercise, or it could be about something else. Feel free to pause the video if you want to take a little bit more time to think about this. All right. Now that you know what change you're thinking about, we're going to go back to those stages of change. So our goal here is to identify your own stage of change. So if you're thinking about the change, you're probably at least in the contemplation change, because contemplation is when you're sort of weighing your options about whether the change is a good idea or not. But you might also be in preparation. You might be starting to think about how you would take those action steps. Or you may have already started your change and be in that action phase. So take a moment and think about where are you in your own change journey around whichever topic is most pertinent to your life right now. All right. Now that you understand the change you're trying to make and understand the stage of change you're in, we're going to delve back into some more motivational interviewing tools to help you explore that change and then firm up your commitment to that change that you're saying that you want to make for yourself. So motivational interviewing relies on 4 principles. They're expressing empathy, supporting self-efficacy, rolling with resistance, and developing discrepancy. So what do those mean? Expressing empathy. So here we want you to express empathy for yourself. Tell yourself change is hard, and I deserve to have this good change in my life. It's normal not to make that positive change the first time you try, and so you want to have empathy with yourself to understand that, like, just because you try and don't get it the first time, that doesn't mean that it's not something you're ever going to be able to get. And so just having that empathy and kindness towards yourself or towards that other person who's making the decision is the first thing that's so important in motivational interviewing. The second thing is supporting self-efficacy. That's believing that your own change is possible and that you have the strengths and skills that you already have those strengths and skills that you need to help you change. So your change is not going to rely on other people doing it, but instead rely on your own internal and external resources to make it happen, that you can make your own change happen. The next thing is rolling with resistance. What that means is you're always going to have some sort of internal resistance to change, because change is hard and change takes work. And so rolling with resistance means that it's okay to think of reasons why change is bad, or why change is scary, or why it's hard. And it's important to let yourself have those feelings and have those thoughts and have emotions. You just sort of roll with it. And then if you're not fighting those reasons about that ambivalence, those reasons not to change, then it's easier to get back to those core reasons why the change is going to be positive, why it is going to be good. And then the last thing is developing discrepancy. And that discrepancy means the difference between what you want for yourself and what your actions are doing. So for example, if you're like, I want to be a really healthy person. I want to run a 5K one day. It's important to me that I'm healthy so I live a really long time. Those are values and thoughts, but I might have a discrepancy between those values and thoughts and my actual actions of sitting on my couch most of the time. But acknowledging and developing those gaps between what you're saying you want to do or what you should do or what you could do and what you are doing. So when you're thinking about your change and you're holding this empathy, you're holding this value that you do have the skills to do what you need to do, you're not beating yourself up for arguing against yourself, and you're acknowledging those differences between what you're doing and what you want. We also use this tool, which we call ORs. So ORs helps us understand our own motivating factors for why we want to make the change. And so that means we're using open-ended questions, we're affirming our strengths, we're using reflective listening, and summarizing for ourselves. So open-ended questions are simply just questions that can't be answered with a yes or a no. So instead of, are you going to go for a run today? Which is you answer with a yes or no question, you say, what would make it easier to run today? Or instead of saying, so are you going to go blow your money on a Nintendo? You say, how might you spend your money, or how might you feel about the way you spend your money? So some open-ended questions that we could use in a couple of these examples are, what are your options? What are your options for how you're going to spend this check? What are your options around exercising? And then we might also ask ourselves, how do I normally make decisions about money? What exercising in the mornings or afternoons? We say, what works well and what challenges do you normally have? And these are just open-ended ways to start exploring in yourself what are the barriers and what are the what might get in the way of making this positive change you want for yourself. First, our affirmation of strengths. And this goes along with the principle that you have in yourself, that self-efficacy. You do have skills that can help you make this change you want to make. So you want to ask yourself, what strengths and skills do you already have that you can use to help you with the situation? So, and these are just an example, and you probably have separate strengths or different strengths in your own life, but you might be really responsible. You might prioritize health or have good self-control, or it might be important to you that you provide for others. It might be important to you that you keep your promises to yourself, or have a really high level of commitment, or maybe you're really creative, and so you can use your creativity to help you come up with a plan that's going to make this change or solve this problem. And the important part of this affirmation of strengths is identifying in yourselves, what are you already really good at? What skills do you already have that can help you make this positive change? Whether it's around money or whether it's around exercise or whatever it might be. The next piece of ORs are reflective listening and summary. So reflective listening is mostly something that you do if you're using MI with somebody else and not so much on your own. But summaries are just a way to sort of crystallize or pull together your current thinking on a situation. So right now, I want you to take a minute and summarize your current thoughts on this change you want, whether it's how you're going to spend your CARES Act check, about your exercising, or something else you've thought of. I encourage you that it might be helpful to pause the video for a moment and even write this down if this is a change that you're really looking to make here. The next tool that we're going to use, it's called a decisional balance worksheet. And it's really a glorified pro and con chart, but it's a great way to tease out both those positive and negative things about changing. Really can honor and validate those reasons why it's hard to change. And if we're clear about those reasons why it's hard to change, if we can look at them in black and white, then that usually makes it easier to address those and overcome those barriers. For our decisional balance worksheet, you can tell that it's a pro-con chart with pros in one column and cons in another, so our positive and our negative things. But then we're going to do that twice. We're going to do that for staying the same, and we're going to do that for making the change. So if you can find a little piece of paper and sketch this out for you, just this 2x2 grid where you have pros of staying the same and changing and cons of staying the same and changing. This is one really helpful way to organize your thoughts around whichever change you're trying to make. All right. So I'm going to go through this exercise with both of our examples today. So one example was our money management. In this example, we're going to say you've got some extra money, maybe through the CARES Act, maybe through something else. And for us, in this example, staying the same is going to be maybe splurging on something fun. Maybe that's our normal pattern, that we sort of have the impulse to use some retail therapy or just buy things that our better selves might think are unnecessary. And then the change we're going to talk about here is saving for a rainy day, or just maybe keeping that money for like a bigger necessity. So in the upper left here, first we're going to talk about the pros or the positive things of not making that change, of just splurging the money. The positive things might be that it feels comfortable, it's easy to do this, makes you feel better in the short term. You get the Nintendo Switch, and that's super fun, especially when you're stuck at home. And so it's okay to acknowledge and write down those things that are really positive about staying the same and not making the change. Then we're going to move over to the cons, or the negative things about this. Maybe you're going to feel guilty for spending the money on video games. Maybe you just know that you'll regret it in the future, and the future regret is really a negative thing about splurging this money. And then that lets us move over into the positive things about making the change. Maybe a positive thing is that it helps you provide for your family in the future. Maybe you feel responsible, you feel proud of yourself, you're glad that you're meeting your goals, and maybe those are your positive things. And then maybe you do have a negative thing about making that change and saving for a rainy day. Maybe your negative thing, this con in the change box, is that you might be a little bit more bored at home if you don't get that thing in a splurge. So you sort of want to lay this out, and then you can start to weigh those boxes against each other. So say, is it more important that or what's more important to me, that I do something that's comfortable and easy, or I feel guilty, or I feel responsible and proud of myself and a little bored at home? And I really like this tool because it lets me really think about this change I want to make from all the angles, acknowledge the things that are hard, and then also make plans to address those. So if the worst thing about making this change is that I'm going to be bored at home, maybe I can think of different ways to beat that boredom or stay involved or active, to really mitigate or reduce those negative effects of this choice. So with our other example, we'll talk about the change of exercising more. So staying the same would just be sort of like staying indoors and being that couch potato is our stay the same row. And then making the change is maybe going for a jog every morning, really pushing ourselves to get out there. And then we're also going to do the pros for each of these and the cons for each of these. So what are the good things about staying indoors? Again, it's comfortable, Netflix is great, sort of inertia leaves you there on the couch. What are the bad things about staying indoors? Maybe you still feel guilty, your health gets worse. You know that the longer you wait to start exercising, the harder it is. Maybe also you're just feeling a little stir crazy, and that's a bad thing about staying indoors and not getting out to go for a jog. What are the good things about making your change? What would be the good things about getting outside and running? The weather is really nice. You know that it improves lung and heart health, and it just feels good to accomplish it and to really just get out there and reach a goal you set for yourself. There might also be some negative things about going for a job. You might be sore or exhausted at first. That's like a real effect of exercising for the first time. It's okay to say that. You might have more allergies exposure if that's something you're dealing with outside this time of year. But again, by putting this out onto this decisional balance worksheet, onto this chart, and you can be like, oh, I'm worried about allergies, but really I could just change up my allergy meds or do something different there. Or, oh, I might be sore and exhausted at first, but what could I do to make it easier for myself or pamper myself a little bit if I do get sore? So maybe I'll draw myself a nice bath or use one of those muscle roller things. So it lets you really lay out those barriers and think about how you're going to address them in a real way. So if you were using one of these examples, either money management or exercising, or have a different example, I want you to stop the video now and lay out your own decisional balance worksheet. Really think, what are the pros and cons, the positives and negatives of both staying the same and making this change or making this positive decision that you're thinking about making. Now that you've done your decisional balance worksheet, I'm going to take a little bit of time for this reflection and this summary part of our ORs. So I want you to think, what changed for you after doing this exercise? And what new things did you consider? What was maybe there that really felt good to name and put out there and acknowledge as a reason why you're changing or not changing? And then I want you to take a minute and think about, what might you do next? Is there something in the negative box of the change that you have a way that you can address that to make it not a bad part of changing? And what's the next planning stage you can take here? And it's important to remember that this tool is a process. Again, change doesn't happen overnight. We go through these different stages of change. It's a cycle, and it's okay to mess up sometimes. And that just means that you have more knowledge and information that will help you the next time that you work on making this change. So we're also going to talk a little bit here about how to help other people use this tool, because motivational interviewing is definitely something that I can work through with you on this video, but it's also a really helpful tool to use with people you care about and when you're supporting them in making a change. So important things to think about if you're helping other people use this tool are to really use those ORs. You want to use those open-ended questions. You want to ask them why that change is important to them. Ask them what's been hard or easy about it in the past. You want to use your affirmations. You want to help them identify in themselves the strengths they have. So for instance, at the house, working with a young person who was thinking about making the change to switch jobs into a new job, one affirmation I used was, you're a hard worker, and you know you're a hard worker because you really succeeded at your old job, and you can use those skills of being a hard worker and having commitment through the application process and in your new position too. So really identifying that strength of someone being a hard worker and having commitment, and helping them see how it can apply not just in the past, but in their future too. Then your reflections and your summaries. You want to make sure that you're really listening to the person you're talking with. Remember, every person is the expert in their own experiences. So you really want to reflect to them what they're saying is important for them, and try to leave your own values and thoughts out of it, and help them summarize sort of what their thinking is on a topic. So you want to listen to what they think is best for themselves. You really want to try to avoid advice giving as much as possible, and help elicit from them what they think the best thing is in their own life. So why do we say to avoid advice giving. One, if you give advice to someone and then they do it and there's a poor outcome, then they're just going to blame you for telling them to do something that didn't turn out bad, because you don't know everything about their life and you can't tell the future. So it's hard to give perfect advice every time. And that can really make it difficult for them to take responsibility or make positive change on their own in the future. But what happens if you give someone advice and it's really good advice and it goes well? Well, if you give someone really good advice, then they're also just coming back to you to hear what you think they should do every time. And so that's also not honoring that self-efficacy, the ability that they have to make their own change. So we really want to stay away from advice giving. We want to help give people the tools to make their own decisions in their life, and choose the path that they know is best for them. So we want to help them use these tools to make their own decisions. So you can introduce this decisional balance worksheet, you can talk to them about which stage of change they're in. And these are all, you can ask them these open-ended questions about what's gone well or what they might do in the future. And these are all tools that you can help give people around you to make those positive decisions for themselves. So in summary, you're in charge of your own decisions and you do have the knowledge and skills you need to be able to make the positive change and the positive decision in your own life. It can be helpful to spend time thinking about what is your motivation for change, and why do you want to make this change for yourself? What are the positive things about changing? What are the negative things about staying the same? And how can you use that knowledge you have about this decision to make good things happen for yourself in the future? And then be kind to yourself. Again, it's normal to try to make a change one time and then not be able to sustain that in the long run. And you're just going to use that knowledge for the next time you try to make a change, because now you know more about yourself and you'll have a better shot at making it sustainable in the future. So thank you so much for hearing today about how we might use decisional balance worksheets and the skill of motivational interviewing and making change and making decision in your life. If you have more questions about the House program and how we're helping homeless youth in Mesa County, you can visit thehousebj.org. If you know a young person under the age of 25 who has unstable housing, who doesn't have a safe place to go, our 24/7 on-call line is 970-234-7004. 24/7, a way to connect to young folks in need of housing with help and resources. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of your day wherever it takes you.